All right, for this section, I'm going to skip around a bit because I focus more on the white blood cells or the leukocytes during the immune system section. So I focus more on just your regular circulatory system and the red blood cells here, less so for our leukocytes. So we're going to look at the function of them, look at how they look, and how they're created. For this, again, I'm going to skip around a bit just because, again, I shifted more of that emphasis dealing with the immune system. Okay, so let's look at our leukocytes. Our never let monkeys eat bananas. So our 5 different types of white blood cells. They are the least abundant formed element. So if you remember our little hematocrit from earlier, it's that little thin white line in the middle. Their job is, and this is the function, to protect against infectious microorganisms, so different pathogens, virus, bacteria, fungi, and anything else that is a type of pathogen. So even allergies, like people who have allergy to like pollen or milk protein, the lactose, that can actually elicit an immune response. So once they are created, again, in our red bone marrow, they only hang out in the bloodstream for a little bit because their job happens in our different tissues, particularly the connective tissue where it has space to kind of migrate around. So with these white blood cells, unlike our red blood cells, they do retain their organelles, and that is for protein synthesis. So again, all those antibodies that are created against different pathogens, those antibodies, you need the DNA in that cell, you need your endoplasmic reticulum, you need your ribosomes in order to create those that protein. So you need all that machinery still there. So, going to kind of skip through. So we have 2 different categories of leukocytes. Either they have granules, so you'll see those little dots in cells, or they don't. And they have different types of looks to them. So our neutrophils, which is our most abundant, can't really see them, but they have like 3 to 5 lobes on the nucleus. Our eosinophils, kind of orange looking. Basophils has so many of these granules, you actually can't see the nucleus. And then there are some that don't have the granules. These are lymphocytes. Kind of bluish in color, very dark violet nucleus, so only one round one. Monocytes, a little bit larger, kind of a C-shaped nucleus. So when you do that identification on Connect, you'll actually look at these different characteristics to determine what they are. Unfortunately, on that, on the microscope section, is just too small. I can't really see it. Okay, so granulocytes, again, you see the little dots, those are the granules. So neutrophils having multiple lobes, eosinophils, orange, can't really tell too much, but it's kind of orange-ish. And this one, all you see is dots, so you can't actually see its nucleus. So they have their own different jobs. You'll focus that on the immune system section, which is exam 7. So I'm going to skip through that for this YouTube video, make it nice and shorter. Okay. Lymphocytes, so this is our first one without the granule. So a granulocyte, their job is just to destroy cells. These are they're dangerous if you're a pathogen. Basically, they kill stuff or they make antibodies to target those pathogens to be killed off. And then monocytes, the other type. Okay, so their job is to help activate your other ones. Again, C-shaped nucleus for it. They also will go through phagocytosis, so eat stuff, and help break down our foreign pathogens. So that's how they're able to activate the immune system, because they're going to present that foreign flag on their cell surface to alert our immune system. So we'll go into that in the exam 7. Okay, production of it. Don't think that's on the study guide. Let me double check. Nope. Okay, cool. So they do have their own set of production. I could care less about you knowing them. Again, they hang out some. They die off a lot faster. Some hang out for a while, and that's how we're able to have immunity for a lot longer. For example, if you have for example, your tetanus shot, you're supposed to get that every 10 years, at least here in America. That's the, the kind of guidance. So those cells that were produced because you had that vaccine, they're going to stay in your body and give you protection against if you do end up getting that bacteria. So again, they branch off from a type of stem cell, and then they go through their own process, and I could care less. And then they become your 4 different types. Some of these actually will become even further differentiated. For example, our lymphocytes will become into 3 different types of killers. So our NK cell, which is literally called the natural killer cell, our T cells, and our B cells. So they have a little bit further development to go. Okay, so again, on that Connect Blood Lab, I'm literally telling you to cheat on that section with the microscope. Yes, you're still going to have to focus the microscope and go through all your little boxes to trick the computer program into thinking you actually did the assignment. You're going to do the smart thing and calculate. Trust me, it works. I've done it. I found out this trick from another student. So again, you're going to do like, okay, basophil, found 1 of those, eosinophils, found 2 of those, and I think you do monocytes, do 3 of those, and then calculate the rest. Essentially, cheat for that little section, again, because it's at 40x. It's super ridiculously small. You can't really tell the difference that well. So don't try to be like, oh, I'm just going to be no, just cheat through that section. You got better stuff to do. Okay, so dealing with your blood count, you have different ways of looking at the health of your blood. So again, we have our hematocrit, where we're looking at the percentages of how much is red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So making sure you have enough of your cells. They're like, okay, we got enough red blood cells, we should have good oxygen carrying. Looking at your hemoglobin concentration. So again, how much oxygen can you carry? And then your counting of your different types of cells. You can go down to your different white blood cells, and that's how you're able to determine sometimes different specific immune responses. So what sick are you? So that's sometimes how they're able to do it, because you'll have one of these that is out of balance. It'll be a larger amount than normal, because that red bone marrow starts producing that specific type, because that specific type does that specific job. Okay. So this last section, again, I'm going to skip through this one because we are down, at least for this chapter, down to the last 2 questions. So fairly fast through. Let's get stopping of the bleeding. So we've talked about our different blood cells. Let's talk about the platelets. So define hemostasis and hemorrhage. So hemostasis, we are stopping the blood. So stopping our bleeding. And I believe hemorrhage is the other one. Hemorrhage is excessive bleeding. So not just a little paper cut. This is where you are bleeding a lot of blood volume out, which is very dangerous. We'll talk about that maybe next chapter, something like that. Anyway, you have a certain blood volume that you have to maintain, because if not, you don't maintain blood pressure. You're not getting your nutrients to your tissues. They die off. Great. Okay, so the last question, the 3 hemostatic mechanisms and how they help stop blood flow. So here are our 3. First, you have vascular spasm, platelet plug formation, and blood clotting. So the platelets, they actually help with all 3. They just don't, aren't little pieces of cells that just kind of stick around. So our platelets are our last formed element of the blood. They can move around like amoebas, so they kind of stretch out a little piece of themselves and then drag and stretch and drag and stretch and drag. That helps them to be able to move around. We do have a normal platelet count. And that, again, you want to have enough platelets, so when you do need to stop blood, there's enough platelets to do the job of hemostasis, so causing a stopping of the bleeding. If you have low platelet counts, even shaving can cause a murder scene to look in your bathroom. I have a friend of mine who, her daughter has low platelet counts, and when her daughter shaves, basically the bathroom looks like a murder scene, just because, you get that cut. It might be a small one, but for her, not enough platelets to stop easily, and so there's just blood everywhere. It's kind of disgusting. Okay. Job of our platelets. So it's going to secrete what's called vasoconstrictors. So they're going to take the blood vessels and, this way. Whatever. Okay, so it's going to take our blood vessel and constrict it, so make them smaller, and therefore less blood flow is able to go to that area. Itself forms the platelet plug, so sticks together and helps to block the blood from moving. Secretes different other clotting factors, helps to attract our neutrophils and monocytes, so 2 of our white blood cells, to that area, so just in case it is a cut where you have bacteria that could come in or a virus that can come in, help to attract them to that area so it can do its immune response. It also can phagocytize, so it can always also eat stuff and therefore destroying the bacteria that might be there. So there's a bunch of different steps for the platelets to produce. Basically, you have these megakaryocytes, these big giant cells are hanging out in your red bone marrow. They stick out a little extension into the flow of your red bone marrow, and as the blood flows, it just kind of flicks off little pieces of cell off of that megakaryocyte and therefore producing your platelets. Okay, how does vascular spasm work? So this helps to clamp down on that blood vessel, helps to prevent blood flow and therefore reducing your blood loss. So causes of vascular spasm, so closing off of that blood vessels. If there's some kind of pain, it'll actually cause the blood vessels to constrict. So again, preventing blood loss and injury. If there's smooth muscle injury, so preventing blood loss, because smooth muscle would be all your internal type of organ type of muscle. So internal bleeding, bad. Okay. Platelets also releasing serotonin, which is used as a vasoconstrictor. That also causes the vascular spasm. So closing off of those blood vessels. So effect of it, constrict the blood vessels, make them smaller, less blood flow, and it helps to provide time for your other clotting pathways to do their job. So platelet plug. So normally on your blood, darn, I'm gonna have to draw this. I didn't realize that. Is it on the next slide? Yeah, that's why. I'll just do it on the next slide then. Okay, so normally in your blood, the regular endothelial cells, they have a coating on them called prostacyclin. And that normally just keeps this red blood cells and platelets and white blood cells and anything else, just makes everything nice and slick and everything just able to bounce off of the blood vessel and just keep moving. So keeping them from sticking. If you have injury, it exposes collagen that is around the blood vessel, so helping with its structure. The platelets will stick to them. If you have damage to your blood vessels because of high blood pressure, then you also can cause areas where the platelets can stick, and so that's how some people end up with a heart attack. Platelets, red blood cells, everything else can stick. Okay, so when you have a cut, your broken blood vessel, instead of having an area where it's nice and slick, the collagen sticks up, the platelets stick to them. Again, remember our platelets can move and stretch, and so they'll stretch and, get to each other, hold on, contract to close in and form a plug, and that just helps to keep out other stuff. They secrete a bunch of different chemicals to help with blood clotting, so that's also another job to do it. So they just keep a positive feedback cycle, so opposite of a negative feedback. We are continuing the chain, so continuing the chain until you seal off that blood vessel. So here are our 3 steps. We have our first one, our vascular spasm, vasoconstriction, causing smaller blood vessels, so that reduces our blood flow. We have exposed collagen, so we don't have a nice smooth surface, so our now little platelets, they can start sticking to it, causing our platelet plug. Next step, coagulation, so our blood clots. So our platelets are going to start releasing factors to cause our blood to clot up and therefore sealing off the broken blood vessel. Then eventually this will heal up and allow for that blood clot platelet plug to break apart, and eventually you can start flowing blood in that area again. Okay, so this is the last one. There's a bunch of different pathways of how this works, so it is highly regulated. I could care less about you knowing it, because it's a bunch of unnecessary steps. You might have to learn it later, but not for my class. So there's just a bunch of different steps, different organs that are involved, different things that happen. There's a bunch of regulation, making sure that you are closing off blood flow for a reason. So again, bunch of different factors that help with determining in order to get you to actually form the clot. And then there's also a whole situation of, is it time for this clot to be retracted, to break apart so you can have blood flow again? So again, everything's regulated, but it's a bunch of steps that I could care less about you knowing. It's not on the test. I just left it on there just to show that there are different things, a variety of different steps that help to regulate that process. Now, normally, in order to prevent clots, because you don't want your blood flow to be stopped abnormally, vitamin K helps with forming of the clot. So, for example, some people, because of their cardiovascular disease, they can take medications such as coumarin or warfarin, which is also called Coumadin, just different version. Basically, they block vitamin K, and so therefore blocking the clot and keeping the blood from flowing. Aspirin, which is blocking thromboxane A2, which is one of the molecules on those long pathways. So this is why older people, when they take those little aspirin, the mini aspirins every day, it's because they're trying to keep the clot from happening and therefore keep you from having a heart attack. Okay, so again, a bunch of different factors in order to dissolve clots or keep them from happening. One thing I'm just going to mention, for example, some blood-sucking animals will produce things that prevent your clot from happening, or we actually can use them to bust up a clot, help people from, again, not having a heart attack. They actually can produce stuff to keep clots from happening, and that's why they're able to continue to feed. So leeches do this, bats do this, different other bugs. They will produce elements to keep blood flowing so they can keep feeding. And that is the end of Chapter 18, finally. So, again, if you have questions, let me know. Yeah. Finish that study guide, especially if you're in an online class or you're taking an online exam, because you can use it on the exam. So finish that study guide. Let me know if you have questions, and I'll see you for Chapter 19.